Good day, class. Today we're going to go over Unit 3, SAS 10, Statistical Bias in Research Studies and Polls. I think you're going to love that this is the last packet of this unit because it kind of takes us away from doing a lot of heavy definition sets when it comes to statistics. Now, I found the definitions very interesting and probably informative because it kind of brings to light how sometimes we take things for granted in regards to just knowing that because we're told the study says something that we think it's all true, but we have to always go ahead and err with the side of caution, and then also not only that, but also think about what can we do if we're tasked to do a survey study in order for us to do something that is fair for everybody, basically removing as much bias as we can. Now let me go ahead and show you a question that was asked. 3 out of 4 dentists recommend tightened gum for those patients who chew gum. I want you now to consider the bias or the impartiality of the statement. I would like for you now to consider the question about these 3 out of 4 dentists who recommend tightened gum for those patients who chew gum. And I want you now to think about the following questions. Which sources of statistical bias can heavily affect experimental studies? And are those sources unique to experimental studies, or could they also occur in observational studies? What I'll do is I'll go ahead and pause the video and then select on somebody randomly to share their thought about these two questions to the class. So I'll go ahead and pause the video now. As we were talking about, we went ahead and saw and spoke about several types of bias features or sampling bias, or things that were done intentionally to make things biased, or unintentionally. And I wanted to go ahead and bring out this example of, it says, will we find the average height of American based on a sample of NBA players? And I think we would all say, no, that's a really bad selection bias. And unfortunately, this is, I would say, one of the biggest things that causes a lot of biasm when it comes to biasm in statistics, because it's really the people behind who's being studied that has to do with the fact if you're going to get a good result, a good solution. Now let me go ahead and show you a very famous, well, not a famous picture, but it's a famous picture in statistics when it comes to bias. Dewey defeats Truman. Now, I don't know if you realize this, but has anybody ever heard of President Dewey? I think anybody's probably thinking no. And that's because this paper, the Chicago Tribune, printed this as a mistake. Truman was actually the president that got elected, and Dewey was the person that got defeated. But the reason why this is famous is that back then there was a phone survey that went out, and it indicated that Dewey was going to win by the phone survey. And so what ended up happening is that the editor got confident and went ahead and just sent this out to print because it's going to happen. And what they didn't anticipate is that this had to do with selection bias. Now you might be wondering, selection bias, why? Well, back then when phones were first being still in its infancy, well, the only people that could really afford phones were probably just, higher middle class or higher upper middle class people that could afford phones in their homes. And we're talking, this is back in the 1940s. So people that got surveyed were just higher upper middle class people. And that's a criteria for selection bias, bias in sampling. And it basically did a non-representative sample of the general public, and it came out being that as you can see here, that it was wrong. Now this slide right here has to do more with talking about biasm, but especially when you get a business or something that it's important to you and you want to do a study to see how well things are going. You have to be careful who you sample, because if you sample your customers, it says right here you might get a favorable biasm because it says they would not be your customers if they were unhappy. But it's important to know that they might tell you stuff to keep them happy. And Now, if you sample your ex-customers, that might be unfavorable biasing, because if they were happy, they would not be ex-customers. But it's important you know why they left you. If you conduct like a phone-in type of survey, you might get people to give you extreme views, because only people with strong interest in the subject are probably going to be the ones that call in, because otherwise, it's too busy for them to go ahead and vote. And then if you conduct something during the daytime, you might get majority of people who are at home during the interview of the day who do not work. So they or maybe are not a good representative sample of the working population. So these are just some other sources I wanted to kind of bring out there to you. Great class. We'll go ahead. I'll pick up this assignment. It'll be due tomorrow at the end of the period. What I'd like for you to do now is go ahead and finish the assignment from yesterday, SAS 9. I'll be picking that up today, and then I'll pick up the next one tomorrow. So once you're done with that, start on number 10 and then finish it up tomorrow. All right. If you have any questions, please see me in the back.